Hi, hello guys, welcome back. I'm Heather, or Miss Postlethwaite if you're one of my students. This is Pages with Postlethwaite, and we're gonna do a June wrap up. I cannot believe June is over. Wow. Okay, so June. I read a total of 12 books, and of those, 7 of them count as middle grade, with 2 of those being kind of more YA. And I am gonna highlight those 7 books, but I am going to tell you the 2 that are more YA. I'll give you kind of my thoughts, my opinion on where they should probably land. But let's get started. My very first book was Roller Girl. I've had this on my list forever. Was really excited to get my hands on it. It is a graphic novel. Really dives into our main character and just kind of figure out who they are and being okay with that. Like, fighting against some of the push to be a certain way or a certain thing and not being that, just being themselves. I really like this book and I'm really glad that I read it. Quick read, highly recommend, good middle grade. Okay, next. The second book that I read is gonna fall under more of a higher young adult. Damsel by Elena K. Arnold. This one is a banned book. I'll go more into detail on it in that video, which I will highlight. So I probably would not hand this book to anyone younger than maybe 16 plus. It does have a couple of trigger warnings and things in it. It is a very interesting book that takes like traditional fairy tales and gives it a feminist twist. You have a main character, the damsel, her name is Amma, and the prince that rescues her. And throughout the entire book, the prince is telling her, well, this is what's expected. Well, this is what you're gonna do. Well, you're my fate. You watch whether or not this little fairy tale is gonna play out or not, the way the other ones do. Again, this is not middle grade. I would not hand this to a middle grade. The third one that I read is called The One Who Loves You the Most. The author's name is Medina. This was their debut novel. I really tried in my June reading to select books that had protagonists that don't necessarily get a lot of highlight and screen time, I guess. I was looking for main characters, authors, and storylines that focused in on characters who were asexual, or were non-binary. This one piqued my interest, and it actually, our main character, kind of along their journey in the book, figures out that maybe both of those things might fit them. It's a very cute book. It has some of the trappings of being a debut novel. I think that the author tried really hard to put a lot into a little bit of space. And so a lot of the pieces that were in the book probably needed more time, more energy, and more ways to like process through. Our main character who's telling the story lives with her mom, and this one has trigger warnings. Please look those up before you enter this one. It is middle grade, but it deals with some pretty heavy subjects. One of those is mental health. So this has decent mental health representation. It could use a little more positive examples for how to support someone. So Gabriela is our main character. They are figuring themselves out. They live with a very free-spirited mother. They are adopted. They've been adopted from the very beginning. It is a mixed race adoption, and it is just her and her mom. Mom has definitely bouts of depression, and so you have a child who is navigating the space of codependency and really trying to figure out, what do I need to do for my mom? Is my mom having a good day? Is this a good day or a bad day? How do I act accordingly? So you have that layer in the story, which is huge, okay? And I would love to see that one handled differently. You have the added layer where we are coming to school and we don't fit in and trying to figure out who they are and don't know how to define the feelings that they have, the things that are going on for them. They know they're LGBTQ, they have a crush, they're very open about that right off the bat, that they kind of have this crush on someone. That's a piece. And then as the story's progressing, like there was just some weird timing issues that came up that like I struggled with a little bit. For one, 2 new students show up the same day. It's not the first day of school. And with them showing up, and they are definitely the people that Gabriela would hang out with, identify with, be a part of their group. And so that piece is important to the plot line, but didn't make sense to me. It's fantastic representation in that if you see the cover, you literally have binders on the cover. You don't see that. I do love the friends that they make and just the support that they have in that area. There's just so much. This book is 256 pages long, and it deals with things that each of them probably need 200 pages by themselves. And so it was a lot in a little. It was a debut. I can't wait to read more from this author because I see a lot of potential. But yeah, I gave this one 3 stars. Next, The Prince and the Dressmaker by Jen Wang. I loved this book. This was such a fun graphic novel. It's a very sweet story. The pictures are delightful. I really enjoyed this. It's the first graphic novel that I can remember reading on my screen. Like I actually got it on Libby and read it on my phone. I loved it. The book centers on basically a dressmaker who gets picked to help the prince, because the prince likes to dress up at night and wear these gorgeous dresses and go out and be another persona, kind of taking on the town in drag. And it's very heartwarming. It's very sweet. It's very standing up for yourself and learning what you're willing to accept and what you're not. And I mean that from both sides of the coin. Both the dressmaker and the prince need to learn through the story how to articulate what they need and share who they are. Beautiful. It was a great story. I loved it. I think that was a 5-star. It was a 5-star. It's also a banned book, so I'm going to do a video on that one as well. The next one, I actually have this one. Final book, at least so far, in the Tea Dragon Tapestry. I really just absolutely adored this whole series. If you haven't had a chance yet to just grab this series, you won't be disappointed, especially if you're having a hard day. Oh my gosh, these are hugs. They're just hugs in a cover, and I loved all 3 of them. I think all 3 of them got 5 stars every time I read one. They're short, they're beautiful, they're very large books. I kind of think I need to own them, but I don't know that I would want to share them with my students. I think I would just want them at home. So yeah, we'll see. The story with the 3 books in them, you have a storyline. You go back in time in the second book, and then in the third book, you come back to the present, but all those things that happened in the past tie in at the end in the third one. So it's really just a beautiful, wrapped up, gorgeous series. All right, so the next book was Different Kinds of Fruit. Again, this is another book that centers non-binary representation, and I really enjoyed this book. I think it was a 4-star read for me. Never mind, I actually went up to 5 stars. There is a lot of good stuff happening in here. One of the things that I really enjoyed is that our main character, Annabelle, walks through the story learning about herself, about her family, about her friend, about her community, walks in almost blind. She's in 6th grade, starting her new school year. She doesn't go to a traditional public school. She goes to a private school called The Lab. They get a new teacher in who's kind of willing and ready to try new things, and they get a new student. So she has a new teacher and a new student on the first day. Bailey is the new student, and they are non-binary, and Annabelle has never encountered that before in her whole life. And so she is so excited to meet Bailey and to get to know Bailey and to maybe kind of like Bailey. And so she goes home, and it's Bailey this and Bailey that and Bailey this and Bailey that, and she gets a very strong response back from her family. One that she wasn't expecting, and one that kind of throws her. I am not spoiling this book for you, but I am telling you this one was powerful because Annabelle had no idea the world she was actually a part of. And as she goes through the story and starts to build community and starts to find more people around her, like her family, like her friend, it's beautiful. There's this whole thing in the book where the title comes from, different kinds of fruit. Fascinating. You'll never look at vegetables the same again. That being said, this is Kyle Lukoff. I didn't say that previously, sorry. And they have another book that got all the awards. Like, this is a recognized author. So I'm really excited for people to maybe check this one out for a spin. There are moments where it gets a little bit overwhelming and preachy, but it's a character who's being themselves in that element. And for me, it felt authentic. I can understand where maybe for others it might get a little overwhelming. This is a very good book. This is definitely middle grade, and this would definitely help kids understand and come to learn a little bit more about non-binary, trans, families that just are LGBTQ, and it's a powerful book, and it's stayed with me. Good representation for non-binary. That brings us to the next one, which is Moonflower. Definitely falls on that one with a non-binary main character. One of the things that I really appreciated about this one and the next one that I'm going to talk about is that the storyline doesn't center on the fact that we have a non-binary character. The storyline is moving on in its own way, and there just happens to be a main character who is non-binary, and then they have an added element because of that. Thank you. Thank you for books like this. Thank you for just centering a character and allowing them to be themselves and go through the things that they are going through. Does the non-binary elements of this child's personality affect and impact what's going on? Yes, but it's not the centerpiece of the story. Moon is our main character. This book is written by, and I know you can't see the author's name because the library sticker, we love the library sticker's in the way, is Case and Calendar. They have written a lot of very good books that are getting a lot of recognition. So this is a very well-known author. This is the first time I've read from that author, but I am looking at more of their books now. This has huge trigger warnings, very much so. Same thing with The One Who Loves You the Most. Both of these have depression and characters who maybe have some ideation, not loving life. Let me just put it that way so I don't get dinged. Moon is a sad child. Moon is 11. They very much are dealing with depression, and they are walking between what happens at night when they're sleeping and what they are facing in the daytime. And it's very magical realism-esque because the things that are happening in their dreams may actually be happening. Like, there's some questions there. I have questions. This one was triggering for me because I have personal experience with children and young adults who struggle with mental health and depression, and I have taught children in the past who lost that battle. So this one took me a long time to read. And I'm not sure I was ready for it. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. So the book has a happy ending, I will say that. And I think for the right child, this would be a good book for them. I just would recommend the adults in this book's readers' lives read this and be available to talk. This got 4 stars for me because it is a powerful story of ownership and recognition and doing the work, but the journey's rough. It's not long. This is like 220-ish pages, and it's powerful writing. And I think that middle grade kids deserve powerful words and powerful writing. It was hard. It was hard. The last book that I read, with again, non-binary representation, I had never heard of before. I was so intrigued. This cover is everything. This is Lizard Radio. It's by Pat Schmatz. I hope I'm saying that right. I loved it. It was wackadoodle at times. It was so different. The book is set in the near future. It's dystopian. This is probably a book that I would say is upper middle grade to YA. So probably a 13 plus would be my age recommendation here. Cavalli is the main character. We are set in like a near futuristic society. Something has broken everything down, like every government's collapsed, everything collapsed, and they've rebuilt. And they've rebuilt with a lot of like, I don't know, 1984 elements to it. There's like this approved curriculum and way for people to behave. There's a quarantined off section for the people that are just hopeless. So criminals and people that can't pass the tests and people that are revolting against the government, they all go there. And then you have the underground, because of course you always have the underground, which is just like the off the radar, under the government's nose kind of thing. Cavalli has always been a little bit of had a different life. So they have a single parent home, which isn't really part of the government normally. They were adopted and the paperwork was approved, which nobody could ever quite figure out why or how that worked. And basically, Cavalli was found like very soon after their birth in front of the house of her mom. So it's all very weird. And so Cavalli's always been told basically that they were delivered there from like this lizard race and that someday they'll have to go back and they're going to save the world and all of that. That they have found a lot of comfort in that story. And so they really are drawn to that lizard idea. They end up at this crop camp, like learning how to agriculture raise crops because you need a occupation in the future. The whole society is very interesting. They are very anti-LGBTQ. You can kind of get that, you pick that up. The slang in here, I really enjoyed this book. The storyline, kind of like Moonflower, is not about whether or not Cavalli is non-binary or not. It is about all this other stuff. Science fiction and dystopian society and finding their place and fighting back. I could not put this book down. I think I read it within 12 hours. I could not put this book down. So every time I had to go and do something else, I was really irritated because I really just wanted to be reading my book. So that's my highest praise for this one. I'm not doing a very good job. I know I'm stuttering. I loved Cavalli. I loved this. Non-binary, they would be called a bender in this society because they don't really fall on the binaries and kind of bend the spectrum there. I know there's other elements to that. This was written in 2015. So this is still very early on when we weren't getting much representation for trans or LGBTQ like centered middle grade, young adult fiction. So Pat really opened a door here and really set some foundations. They've written quite a bit. I am definitely seeking out more books by this author. I kind of went and did research because that's who I am. And they did this article for this magazine with Girls of Summer, 18 Books for Strong Girls. And so they're highlighting Pat's book, and they asked a question, and I loved this. And they asked, how did you first become interested in writing about the topic or character in your book? And Pat says, like Cavalli, I am fluent in both male and female, but not entirely at home in either place. Although I share many of her traits and experiences, I was not as strong, as brave, or as fierce as she is. Cavalli is my imaginings of my best self. I love that. You can kind of see, actually, a lot of the books that I read this month, the authors all said that there were pieces of autobiographical elements that they really put in. The One Who Loves You the Most, Medina had said that the author of Moonflower was a sad child. Like, they were a depressed kid growing up. And then obviously with Lizard Radio and Cavalli with Pat Schmatz. This was such a good month for reading. I really enjoyed it. I read a lot of different things. I have several books to do some banned book things on. So that's my middle grade month wrap up. I was able to highlight 7 books. If you've never seen a middle grade highlight before, May was much better for me. And I mean, 7 books is nothing to sneeze at, but May was a little more prolific, and I think I read 12 in that one. So here's that video if you'd like to go check that out. And I will have some more coming soon for my banned books. That's what I read. That's what I got to say. Have a good one.